principal of Ithan Elementary, and we have the most beautiful school here. I just wish it worked a little bit better for all the things we need. So if you're a resident or a staff member, I see some here, or you have children at Ithan Elementary, I'm really glad that you're here this evening. We've done a lot of work so far to investigate what it would look like to have a new Ithan Elementary to meet the needs of our students, and it's important that we hear from all of you. So welcome this evening to our school, and it's my pleasure to introduce our superintendent, Ken Baxter.
Thanks, Franny. Thank you all for coming. I got a chance to say hello to many of you as you come in, and I think we have a lot of neighbors, which is wonderful. We really wanted to make sure the neighbors were aware of the plans and what we're looking to do here at Ithan. The purpose tonight is to talk about the proposed site where we'd like to build a new Ithan here on the property, the proposed site, a concept for that site. And I say just a concept because the actual detailed drawings will come in September. And we'll have another meeting, another opportunity for people to see some of the details. We have a concept that we want to share tonight. But again, we want to talk about the proposed site, the concept, and also our proposed, and I'm going to use the word preliminary budget, and our preliminary timeline for completing this. You have a handout, and some of that information is in that handout. We're going to spend, hopefully, we're going to try to stick to about 25 to 30 minutes of presentation, and then open it up for questions. If we had a really large group, we're going to split people up, but I think if the group stays around this size, we'd like to open up the second half of it for questions from all of you. So we'll go through a presentation. We have Mr. Bill Dolan here with us, who is our Director of Operations for Radnor Township School District. We have Mr. Steve Behrens, who's the architect that is working on this project with the school district. So I'll turn it over to Mr. Dolan to run through some of the history, talk a little bit about our steering committee that we've put together that has been working on developing this to the point of where we are now, where we're at a point where we can recommend a location for the building, and again, as I said, a concept. Before I turn it over to Mr. Dolan, I just want to give you a little bit of history too. This is my 6th year in the school district as superintendent. And probably right around my 1st or 2nd year, the school board said we need to set up a long-term capital plan for all of our buildings. We realized that it was very important that we do a thorough investigation of all our buildings, understand the strengths, weaknesses of each building, and then develop a plan, a long-term plan for addressing the buildings, not only to make sure that the buildings are functioning well, but also to be good stewards of our tax dollars, and that we're planning for all our buildings appropriately. Through that study that we did when we looked at the conditions of all our buildings, we realized that this building, out of all our buildings, built in 1963, and some of the challenges with the building, that it didn't make sense to pour a lot of money into the building, making repairs, and other challenges that we had between the roofing and repairs and other things that are going on, that it really made more sense to build new. So that decision to build new was a decision that we made June of this 2022 with our school board, and that's when we then assembled a steering committee to start looking at how do we go about this now, what's the process. So I'll turn it over to Mr. Dolan to go through some slides, and as I said, we'll present for about 20, hopefully 25 minutes, and then we'll open it up for questions.
Thank you, Dr. Baxter, I appreciate it. And thank you all for being here. We do recognize a lot of you. So a combination, well represented like our steering committee is. You do have handouts in front of you. That is some of the slides that you're gonna see, not all of them. And I would ask if you don't mind when you leave, if you could leave those packets with us, simply because anytime we're handing out anything that has a potential building plan that might be actually a real floor plan in the future, given the environment we're in, we're trying not to share those out publicly, but we did want you to be able to see them and share as we go along on our slides. So again, as Dr. Batchelor said, this has been a long process, and we're just in one phase of it right now. We decided last June that yes, we needed to replace Ithan Elementary, and we would replace it on this site. We had to get a team together. Steve Behrens is one of those team members. We engaged our architects, resident architects, who Steve represents, he's one of the principals there, in the fall of 2022. And then we formulated out of the steering committee that had worked on that long-term feasibility study, we took some of the members of that, and as we were wrapping up that committee, formed a new committee. That committee began work in earnest in January of this year, but we formulated it at the end of December last year. And then very soon, we hope to do it in June, we'll bring on a construction management company so that they can be involved in this team as we're still in the design phase, as we're still doing due diligence work, as we are talking about how we would actually build adjacent to this building, and they can have a lot of practical stuff to add into the design documents and the bid documents that go out. And then we're gonna talk a little bit about the timeline. Again, we're in what we call a programming phase, and I might, when we get to that slide, throw it over to Steve for a minute. The programming phase is when we decide the size that this building needs to be to fit our needs, the location on the site, the relative cost based on some Pennsylvania Department of Education Act 34 regulations. So there are a lot of things that whittle down our options here and lead us to what is the best solution for this site. And we'll look at that in a minute. And then the next steps from this, and we're asking our board next week to approve this plan and this programming phase so that we can move on to the next phase, as Dr. Batchelor mentioned, which is the schematic phase. Then we get a little bit more into the nitty-gritty. You'll see some plans there that have some actual rooms laid out in there. That's just a concept right now. That is not exactly how the building will be, but we need to get to that next level to get into those details. So we talked about the team, and the steering committee has been hard at work. That team, we tried to represent both community and parents and staff, teachers. It's also comprised of a lot of our administrators who have access to the teachers and to our special ed needs and our security needs. And that group has been meeting almost weekly when you add it up. This is a list of those folks. Some of you are in the room, and thank you for your service on this committee. I think I could speak for everybody in this group that we would be happy to hear from you with your questions and get back to you. So you could reach out to me. You can find our information on the website. There's a whole page of the website dedicated to this effort. And then if it's a specific question and you want to direct it to anybody on here, we'd be happy to get in touch with them. Again, I said we've been meeting almost weekly when you add up our monthly meetings that the full committee has been at, and then bi-weekly meetings and sometimes weekly meetings with just a specific group of administrators and the architect and our site engineer, our civil engineer. We've been busy through this programming phase to make sure we get it right, that we get the site size, location, and cost right. And again, I've mentioned it comprises of folks that are knowledgeable in these areas. We've even gone out, the picture you see there with the handsome gentleman in the forefront. There's Dan. There he is. Dan, I didn't get his permission to put this picture up there, but there it is. That's the Delaware County School. That's over at Springfield. That's their literacy center, which is relatively new. They were kind enough to have us in there so that we could look at what a new school building can be. And they were also really good about saying, there are some things that we did great and we're so happy with. There's some things that, gosh, looking back, we wish we changed a few things. So we're looking to go out to more buildings. We've been to three tours already, just to be inspired, but also to lessons learned from other people that are doing similar projects, and just see how it's going for them. This is that schedule that I talked about. And again, this is on our website. You can see it. This is our target, and it's a long timeline, but we have to keep chunking through phases to get to the point where we're actually building the building and then occupying the building. We are in that programming phase right now, that top section. We are completing that this month, and again, looking to go into that schematic design period. Again, in the design development, we get into a lot more details. That's when we're meeting with more and more people in our district and more people in our current Ithan building to map out the details with the architects, the engineers. It's as we're getting more information back on our site and what we want to do with the exteriors and how we're going to map out. You're going to see a road and some parking spaces and some playground spaces. Those are concepts right now. They still need to be detailed out. That all happens in that next phase. also enter into land development, which is a long process. In that process, we're required to put out a letter to all our neighbors and have meetings and keep you informed. We wanted to get ahead of that by starting now and inviting you out to hear about this project. And then we eventually,
Mr. Dolan,
Oh,
when we talk about the timeline, if I could just jump in too, one of the other pieces, I think the camera's over here, we're trying to record this for people who missed, so I'll move into the camera angle. One of the other pieces that we're going to be talking about in this timeline as we look at a 27-28 school year, hoping in the new Ithan, is that we may be redistricting. We've had, as we looked at our long-term facilities plan, and as we looked at some of our numbers in our other elementary buildings, Radnor Elementary has been pushing capacity for the last couple of years. And there's different areas within our district that some people look at and go, gosh, why do those students go to Radnor Elementary when they're on this side of Lancaster? Should they maybe be over here going to Ithan? Those are things that we're gonna have to start looking at in the 24, 25, and 26 school year as we look to build a new Ithan. Could there possibly be redistricting going on to try to help balance among our buildings? Prior to COVID, redistricting was a really dirty word that you as an administrator want to mention because parents never want to see their kids redistricted. I'm hoping that this is something that, as a community we can look at, and we can also as a community, we're going to look to see, can that redistricting possibly happen as it could maybe happen over time, or it might happen all at once. But that is another phase to all this as we move forward.
thank you. I'm glad that he jumped in for that. I didn't want to say the redistricting word. So thank you, Ken. Yeah, but you can see that we're still in this heavy design process for a while. We won't get to bidding until December of 2024, and then awarding contracts, and again, estimated in February of 2025. So the construction would have us occupying the new building somewhere in that 2027, 2028 school year, if everything goes according to plan here. And the way it would work, and again, next level details, we would build the new building adjacent to this building, occupy it, and then bring this building down and complete the site development. So this, you're gonna see on the plans in a minute, this area in here would be a combination of parking, roadways, parks, trees, that kind of thing. So that's our general schedule that we're trying to work towards right now. Again, another effort we've been making, aside from the steering committee meetings, is also doing site due diligence. A lot of this is done with other professionals. Some of the neighbors here may have seen out through their backyards, or if you're coming through the path to come up to the site, oh, there's some red flags out there. I'm seeing some head nods. Those were surveyors out there. I think our last survey was probably 8 or 10 years ago here. We wanted to make sure we got everything on the property recorded. We're also doing general site analysis. We will eventually be taking some samples of the soil. We won't do that until we know exactly where the building is going to be, and so that we know what we're dealing with when we go into, breaking ground, digging into the dirt. So property surveys. There'll be a full property tree survey done. I think a lot of you know that our woods are beautiful, but they're also challenged right now between grapevines and spotted lanternflies and the ash trees that are dying off. So we want to get a good sense of the condition of our woods. It's almost like getting a complete physical from the doctor, so we know that in this project, what do we need to tackle in the surrounding area. What did I miss on there? Site analysis, a traffic study. So a traffic study was just done, I think it was completed a week ago, so in the last 2 weeks. And we will get the results from that traffic study and work with PennDOT and the township on the traffic study. So that's ongoing, and a lot of that will go on through the schematic phase as well. This is a good slide to talk about where we've considered on the site. So that gray area up there, that's the current Ithan Elementary School that we're in right now. And you see A, B, C, D, and E are areas that we talked about potential locations for buildings. So A and B down the hill a little bit over near Haymarket are two different ideas of buildings, one a courtyard concept and the other one more of that reversed E shape there that would sit down, not quite in the valley, but down the hill a little bit. That is our flattest spot here, aside from the area where we're built on right now. C is over against Sproul Road, but it's long and angular and right up against the setback line there. D is down the hill a little bit, overlaps our tennis court and parking lot. And then E, and I'll tell you right now, E is the one we're recommending. E is hugging the back end of one of the wings of our current building. So it's close to the existing site. That looks like it's right on top of it. It's about 30 feet away in our drawings right now at its tightest. So that's something we have to manage out during construction. I'm sure there'll be questions about that. So again, we've looked at this, did pros and cons for a lot of these areas. They're all different shapes because our architects look at the site and all those little lines you see are grade lines. And I think, Steve, are they about 10 feet? So every line represents 10 feet of drop on there. So as Steve likes to describe it, it's like fitting a puzzle piece into the site. And we want to try to have the building respond to the site. And we know it is a beautiful site with a lot of opportunity for connecting with the outdoors. And all of these shapes reflect an effort to look at how would it fit if we put it over here. Again, these are just close-ups to show that these are those options that you just saw in sort of the Brady Bunch style. So A, B, C, and D are shown here, and you can see that we've played out the details on these a lot more than just plopping them down on the big set. And then we came to the decision that the center location was best. And then from there were two options that we played around with. There has been, since day one, a lot of discussion about what are the things we love about Ithan Elementary, and the courtyard comes up, and the courtyard comes up, and the courtyard comes up. And so we tried to play out how could you do a courtyard here, and that's what you see on the site plan, the courtyard concept on the right. That is a courtyard that is rather large from top to bottom. It's the length of a football field and 50 feet wide, so wider than this room. It's a big courtyard, and because of our new capacity and numbers that we'll get into, that building is 2 stories in the way it sits into the hill, so it's a different kind of a feel. And when we looked at 3D modeling and we looked at the size of it, it was a more costly building, a little bit harder to manage and organize if you're an administrator in the building. And the idea of the courtyard there seemed nice, but it wasn't the same courtyard that we have here at the current Ithan. This other one on the left is the one that we're recommending. That we're now calling the key concept, and I can give Dan credit because I think he said, that looks like a key. And so the key concept takes the idea of what are the things we like about a courtyard here at Ithan and tries to incorporate them into a building that we think is just a better response to the site and to our needs as a district. So going forward, that's that key concept, and some of the advantages you can see are listed up there. I mentioned the cost is a little bit lower. It's a little bit easier to build out. The configuration has more flexibility if we ever needed to add on, whereas that courtyard concept, when we looked at it, wouldn't have been easy to add on. You'd almost have to build in the middle of the courtyard.
Bill, could you remind everybody the black line is the
Oh,
current building?
yes, thank you, Ken. Can you see that traced out in there? I think you have this one in your packet there. So right where the parking lot shows up on this plan is our existing Ithan. Okay. Those little fingers that come out towards me are the bulk of our classrooms. On the parking lot side, that building almost looks like a one-level building like we have now. So you pull up as it grades off, and you go out towards those fingers that are pointing towards me. That's 2 stories, so you would leave out a floor below. Our Radnor Elementary School is very much like that. And you don't really, a lot of people don't even notice that until you're active in the building for a while, and you say, oh, okay, I have to go down a level and then I'm out back. This would be similar. The top of the key up there is all the common space. It's organized as the common space, and then the lower half of the key is classroom space on 2 levels with these little courtyards in between that kind of respond out to the area out back that we go out to now. So it wouldn't feel unfamiliar in that respect as the way it communicates to the property. It's just another close-up of it. This is that first floor level, and again, you can see it's been rotated here, but on the left-hand side, those are the common spaces. You see the gym in there, cafeteria, auditorium. Those are areas that can get shifted around like a puzzle piece. We're not into those details yet. We just wanted to know that they could fit and they could be the right size for us. At the bottom of that massing on the left, that little point there, that's the proposed library there, and that actually floats out and provides a little outdoor area with coverage on it in this concept. And then the fingers of the key come out from there. So again, at the top here by the parking lot, you can see buses and car drop-offs. That's looking like one story. As you come towards the back of the building and the grading drops off over towards Haymarket, the building becomes 2 stories set in. So I'll show you that lower level right now. That lower level, again, the yellow areas and that melon colored area, those are classroom and support room and offices and spaces. The white areas are unexcavated, so there's nothing in there. And the dark gray over here is almost like basement space, unfinished space, just because of the way the hill and the grading would work out. So again, on the lower level, most of the usable, occupiable, educational space is on those 3 fingers, and they're out. A lot of glass, and they look out over the back of the property. That's a little cut through, if we were to slice through it, and the area that I mentioned at the parking lot that looks like one level is up at the top. You can see how the hill cuts away. And then as you get past that yellow area there, you see how the fingers come out. That represents where those fingers are. In that yellow area, you see the little folks standing on the ledge in between. Steve and his team are trying to work out ways to bring more daylight from that great exposure on the back deeper into the building, particularly on the lower level. And so they've done that by, there's areas in the building where there'd be atriums where light can just bounce through the building and make its way into the back. And this is, I think this is a good model of it too. Steve, do we have all 3 of these in here?
Mm-hmm.
Okay, so you can see how, this was for modeling how the sun would travel across the building. So that's early morning and then noon and then in the afternoon, this time of year. But again, I'll just settle on this one for a minute. It shows you the back end of the building. This isn't the approach, but this is the area that looks like it's 2 stories. And I wanted to show you the courtyard concepts that are out back there. We get a little bit into the numbers here. Ken mentioned it. We're looking at about $65 million for this whole effort, and that's not just the cost of the building, but that's the cost of the soft costs. So that's our professionals, our designs, our permitting, furniture in the building, things like that. All of those fees, the construction fees, and these are all, we'll get into this if people want to get into this a little bit later. These are all based on our square footage and our Act 34 limits for what we can do with this building. What, again, our effort here and next week is to go to the school board and ask them to recommend that we accept this key concept and move forward into the schematic phase. And so that gives you a sense of what we've been up to and where we're at right now in the schedule. And I don't know how we did on the 25 minutes, but we're free for questions here now.
And you did very well on the time. I joke with administrators all the time about, let's get to the point where we can open up for questions and any comments. So we would like to open it up. I would like to just go back to one of the designs, because something I think, especially, I know we've got a lot of neighbors. So if we look at the floor, go back so we can see the whole property. Yeah, right there, perfect. So we are investigating whether or not we could open up a driveway or another access point down here by Roberts Road. So that's down here. And there's 2 houses that the school district owns right down here on the corner of the property. And so we are investigating whether that would be possible. We don't know. We don't know what PennDOT will say. We don't know what type of traffic light would need to be installed. We don't know how much work. We don't know that if it's, PennDOT could come back to us and say, sure, you can put an entrance there, but it's gonna be this many millions of dollars. So we are investigating it. The school district has owned those 2 houses for many years. It's quite an interesting story of, we bought them many years ago, we sold them many years ago, we bought them back many years ago. Just because this property is our largest property, and I think over the last 30, 40 years, administration and school board was always thinking of expansion. It would be helpful to have those 2 houses down there. Right now, they're not, neither of them are occupied.
One is a rental, the other one we use for storage.
One is storage. So we're investigating. If that is not possible, and we will be discussing that over the next few years, if that's not possible, this is designed so that we wouldn't need it. We're seeing it as something that could be helpful, could be very helpful for flow, but this design of the parking lot and the loop there are being designed in a way that maybe that's not possible. So questions all of you have? Yes?
So that actually is one of my two questions. So just for frame of reference, I'm a neighbor, not a parent. And we live right on Squirrel Road, literally across from the soccer field, court, football, whatever that would be. So I guess my question specifically on the new entrance is, why are you looking at that as needed? And from a traffic perspective, it seems like it would increase the traffic on Sproul significantly with buses and cars, and I'm just curious a little bit about that side of the thought
One of the
process.
things we've talked about with our transportation director, and not in a great deal, we haven't sat him down with Steve and the design team yet, but we've run through issues that, I'll give Radnor High School as an example, where we've talked about if we can run the buses through one way and not loop them in and out, it can relieve congestion on the other side of the campus and get things moving faster. And when I tell you these guys are pretty good, they have it down to a science by second. So if I'm having a phone call with them and they say, you know, we need 10 minutes? No, we want to be out of there at 3:07 and 30 seconds. And that's what they tell their bus drivers. So we'll talk about exercises like that, whether this would even help with, let's say, running buses out, and we can maybe make it buses only. Or it could be just, it's really just for deliveries and our maintenance folks to come in and out. And it's not really set up, it could be set up as a one-way. So many questions we have about it that we haven't, gone that deep on. Also, I think it's fair to say, if any effort was, if we did do this, it could result in a light there, it could result in having to widen the road for a good stretch, maybe 100 yards or so. This would be a PennDOT kind of a project where it would be regulated to take the current traffic conditions and hopefully make them better, but I don't want to promise that that's the case. Right?
And why are we looking at it? Because the most congested time on an elementary school day on the campus is pick up and drop off. We have a lot of parents who, drive their kids and drop them off, and there's a lot of congestion between the pick up and drop off and buses. And the idea of having another access way, maybe it's only buses, maybe it's only, we're open to all of that, would just help with flow. Is it a must-have? No, this design actually, and where our current Ithan is, and where the parking lot is, and we're getting a loop, we're already spreading out a better bus loop situation than we have here. But for probably many of you probably see the backup that happens down this way during drop-off and pick-off. So we're trying to keep our options open.
Just ask a follow-up on that.
Sure.
The fields, the soccer field and the athletic field, two questions on that. Are those for student use like during the day, or are those for community use after hours, or for both? And then also, just curious what the approximate setbacks are on this diagram for those fields?
So I believe this box here is the current lodge mobile classrooms, or they're called mobile, they haven't moved in many years, so.
Right, that's right.
Those are those classrooms, the modular classrooms, so just to give you perspective.
Okay.
Again, this is a concept, and in doing the concept, we haven't really decided where actually fields will go. I think we have a current field right down here, is where we have a current field. There's going to be playgrounds and fields down here. Is it possible that during the school day, that the kids are using more here instead of walking up there? We haven't really got into that discussion, but that's possible. But I could see if we're doing the field up here, certainly, our community uses our fields often on weekends and rents them too.
Right.
Steve, you might be able to speak to the setback. Gentleman was asking about the setback.
Yeah.
Do you have a guess of what the setback of that lower athletic field is?
Well, that's essentially where the existing field is.
Yeah. So that
So
is our
that-
that's Tim Midget Field,
Yeah.
Connie, right?
I don't believe it's any closer to the road than the existing.
And then the soccer field there?
The soccer is well back, so you can see that the edge of it is at the front of the lodge, more or less.
Right.
So that's, that's well back from,
It swallows up the lodge right
Yeah.
there.
right.
We more in September, I think, can you help me out, September with the schematic design
Yes,
on identifying where our playgrounds, where playground equipment goes.
right.
We really haven't discussed that yet.
Conceptually, yes, you typically don't want students for physical education during the school day having to cross a roadway, right?
Right.
So conceptually, we're imagining that the playgrounds, that again, that large green rectangle
Right.
is more or less where the existing field is. What Mr. Dolan described as the core facilities of the building are essentially where the playground is now. And so that would have to move. But we imagine that just for safety and convenience, that the playgrounds the children are using are behind the building.
Right.
And then, so yes, that space is available out there, right?
Right.
Between the Loop Road and Sproul. So how could we use it? One of the options is to create it as a community resource. And so that's what we would evaluate between now and September. What are the district's needs, and how could this site be better supporting that?
Thank you.
Go ahead.
How steep would that loop be from Roberts Road up to the parking lot? What's the grade? Do you know what the grade would be?
So there's the smaller loop on top,
That loop at the top from Roberts Road up to the parking lot.
but you're asking about this loop here, this new loop that's drawn in, how far is that, or no? What do
How
you-
steep is it?
Oh, how steep is the grade?
Oh, that has not been defined yet. That would go through the detailed design process. There's limits to the slopes of roadways for practical purposes. And so, yeah, again, the existing grades, those lines are 10 feet. That would be too steep, so we'd be looking to level that out.
It's a great question though, because if you stand over there now at the property, you are looking up a hill to the other building. You must be an engineer by trade.
No, I just go out, people get stuck on trying to go to Sprawl Road, it's too steep for them.
You're at
Well,
Saul's.
we're locked in there, right? We can't change Sproul Roads.
Yeah, but
Wherever we
worry
connect
about
to
the other
it,
roads.
right, so wherever we connect to it, we have to meet its elevation. But again, that's all part of the next phase of design.
There was, and again, this goes back to the '70s, there was an addition put on this building, the library. And at that time, for construction, there was an entrance, I believe, right around
Right
here.
where that little notch is. in
Oh,
the
is it
tree
right here,
line.
Steve?
Yeah, which is the crest.
Yeah. So there was an access road in here at one point.
In relation also to that road, how wide is that, will be, to accommodate emergency vehicles like a fire engine?
Sure. It would be probably on the order of 28 feet wide, so it's designed for two-way traffic, delivery trucks, emergency vehicles, all of that would be required.
Because before the lodges were put up there was an issue about bringing, well, a fire engine couldn't get up this hill over here.
Okay.
I didn't realize that. For the neighbors, I haven't heard the complaint, so maybe I shouldn't ask the question, but often our fire department calls and says, can we run an exercise out at Ithan this weekend? And we'll say yes. And I haven't ever heard a complaint from neighbors, but sometimes they do it at night and there's lights. No? Good.
Just maybe a comment, I do deal with PennDOT a lot through the last 30 years of my career. Probably best at a right in, right out maybe there at Roberts Road, and the emergency vehicle access. If you do have a problem with the main point, would probably be your best selling point. The right in saves you time and problem at the Clyde Road intersection, obviously, eliminates traffic going through there. The right out might be a problem just because of the grade going up Sproul. Getting a left out is problematic because of the backup at Brynmore Avenue. I would be shocked if they would buy into that, to be honest with you. I was happy to hear that you're doing a tree survey. As a longtime resident of Whiteman Mills, that's been a concern of ours for a while. It's a tremendous asset that the school has here. I'd love to see that cleaned up, and I think it would be great for the kids to be able to get out final comment is, I do see, and it does look like the pathway to our neighborhood is still part of this overall plan. And that's in some pretty rough shape too, so it'd be nice to have that fixed up a little bit also.
Yeah, that's a great point. I'm glad you bring it up. You're right, it is like, it's a jungle out there in some of those areas, and you just really can't get out into those woods. There isn't a desire or a talk to like close those paths off or anything like that. And I'm glad you said right in, right out, because Hugh Gadzo, he wasn't able to be here tonight. He's our civil engineer, but that's the point he's been making. He said, if we use it, it'll be a right in, right out.
What about adding more paths from other directions as well? Is that something that's being considered?
Well, we could consider it for sure, yeah. That might be good community feedback to say, hey, we have a site where folks like to, would like to come through, and we could consider it. And that could fold into what the condition of the woods is when we get that tree survey back. And then we would talk to administrators here about whether that's appropriate to have, safety, security. We want it to be accessible, but also we want to be able to control it too, so there's a balance. But I think I could probably speak for Trondheim to say we could consider it.
Can you just, so as people in the community understand, can you compare and tell us the size of the existing Ithan Elementary in terms of square footage and student population with what's being proposed? I think that people would probably appreciate hearing that.
I might bring you in on this.
Sure.
And Dan too.
Well, as far as size, the existing building, I think, is about 65,000 square feet. Oh, sorry,
Yeah.
about 65,000 square feet. The new building is about 109,000. The on paper capacity of Ithan from as far as PD is concerned is about 625 students. The new building would be about 800. In sort of what we call Radnor capacity, it's more like 600 and 750. And that is based on, and this again goes back to the feasibility study and what was approved through that process to move forward. There was, that is designed to deal with the projected enrollment growth within the district, as well as potentially some redistricting that Dr. Batchelor talked about to pull kids from other buildings that are feeling a little bit of pressure right now with education spaces within those buildings. And then,
Yeah, but our current
Was there-
population here at Ithan is about somewhere around
503.
500.
500,
Okay,
yeah.
thank you.
Yep, so, I mean, again, on paper, to imagine 625 students in this building is, right, so that's where we get into, there's a paper capacity of a building, but then there's a functional capacity. And the other thing to remember about the new building, its square footage is much larger, not only because of wanting to accommodate more students for enrollment growth, but also the spaces that accommodate contemporary needs of and those needs that are growing in our community with respect to learning support, instructional support. Those spaces don't exist in this building, and in a really effective way. And so the new building would not only accommodate the classrooms that we put students in, but also those support spaces. So it feels like, wow, that's a lot more square footage for that bump in population. But it really, I think more than anything, has to do with the quality of the spaces, the size of the spaces, the types of spaces to give flexibility for the educational programs that we need.
And the functional capacity has to do with the fact that we have really small class sizes in Radnor. And we plan to continue to have small class sizes in Radnor. I can tell you that as a parent in another district with many kids who've gone through elementary school, the most important thing in an elementary school is that class size. And in the region, in the county, we have one of the smallest class sizes, and it's really been something the school board for many years has made a priority and will continue to be a priority. So even though we could see potentially 100 more kids or so in the building, we'd be looking at still having our small class sizes. Dr. Boylan, roughly for each grade level, how many sections do we have? So in first grade right now, or second grade or third grade, roughly we have how many sections?
Right, for right now, most of our grades have 4 sections, and our third grade is larger, we have 5 sections this year.
So this concept right now, we're not down to the details, this concept, if you wanted to add up these classrooms, is looking at dedicating 5 classrooms, am I right on that? 5 classrooms per grade level, but there's also additional special ed and support classrooms in each one of the fingers as well.
Yes.
Yeah, so we are parents, and we had our kids at Radnor Elementary School and coming here. One of the things that makes this school feel special today is it's much smaller. Is there an option that you're considering that preserves more of the existing size to accommodate some growth without redistricting, to prevent as large of a population bump for this school as what's currently proposed?
Well, those were options in the feasibility study. And so when we entered into this phase, it comes down to economics. We looked at options that were additions onto, we can't accommodate an addition at Radnor. We could at Wayne, but the option that was selected to move forward was focusing the new construction for now at Ithan.
That makes it sound like redistricting is a foregone conclusion. Is that the recommendation? And that's, I guess it sounded like it was an idea for consideration. That makes it sound more like a foregone conclusion.
So I would think, again, we haven't made this decision yet, but I would think we were most likely redistricting. I can't imagine, so part of what has led us to this was in the last, and I'm gonna go pre-COVID, because COVID kind of disrupted everything within the school. We had many summers where we were looking at the population of Radnor Elementary, and when Radnor Elementary was built, there was a tri-party agreement between the township, the corporate center, and the school district. And we agreed in this tri-party agreement, which we could open up, but this agreement, that we would never expand Radnor Elementary. And Radnor Elementary, though, had some large spaces for common areas between each grade level pod. I don't know how many years ago now, but I want to say a good 15 years ago, we added these interior classrooms to Radnor Elementary, so there's no window. There's windows to a hallway that has windows, but there's no windows. We added in each of the first grade pod, second grade pod, third grade pod, these interior rooms because of numbers. The numbers were going up. There is discussion of should we maybe take those down now if we have more space, and can we size this properly so that it still feels, again, a size of an elementary school has so much to do with the class size and the community and the feel. You can have a large elementary school still feel small to the kids, especially how we design, looking at different grade levels being in each one of the fingers and how we could set this up. So is it a foregone conclusion? I think there's a strong likelihood because of where we've been with Radnor Elementary over the years. We also are trying to look to be good stewards of the tax dollar. We don't want to build a building and then all of a sudden turn around and we're bringing, and this is the other thing with Ithan. We've had these trailers here for so many years, and we're not using them right now, but they're here because we did use them at one time. At one time, this building was much bigger, and we were using classrooms up there. 3 or 4 years ago, we almost sent, right before COVID, we contemplated using some of the lodge because we went up 4 sections. That was an additional, classroom in 4 different grade levels that we didn't anticipate. And we were preparing to have students go back up and use that lodge area. So, it's a long-winded answer, but most likely I would see us redistricting. And I also think there could be areas within our community that might make sense. Right now we do have families that, go, I live here, but why do I go over there? Should I be over here? And so it's a good opportunity for us to look at that.
I have a couple of questions. First, with the redistricting proposal increasing student population here, has that all been rolled into the traffic
traffic analysis is all based on the size of the building that we're looking at.
Yes.
Okay, good. The second one, I don't read schematics very well, but I see a whole bunch of doors on this particular schematic. And are all of those gonna be available for entrance in morning, evenings? I'm concerned about security issues.
No, they typically would not. So again, that's to be developed, that would be administered in different ways. But the typical scenario would be that in the morning, you have students entering. What we do want to separate is the bus traffic and the car traffic, right? So it's conceivable that you could have the entrance here off of the bus loop open, as well as the entrance off of the car loop open. You could certainly administer those two entry points to the building. When the building is in operation during the school day, then we would determine where the visitor parking would be, where that secure entry to the building would be. Again, that's why the administration suite is positioned where it is in this diagram. Good surveillance of the approaches to the building. Visitors would enter the building through the outer doors and then be directed into the administration suite to be vetted, to be determined, and they may or may not proceed into the building from there. The other doors are available for code required egress, right? But also, to Mr. Dolan's point earlier, we're trying to engage the landscape. And so is there an opportunity, again, as we move forward with design, to discuss with the stakeholders, is there a way that we can open up opportunities for students to circulate through the landscape as they do in the courtyard now, where for curricular opportunities, for program opportunities, to utilize the outside. Maybe there's a fence. It's that all questions to be determined, but yes, safety, security, that's front of mind as the plan gets developed, and securing and monitoring those entry points is obviously critical.
You bring up a good point. We have one teacher on our steering committee who would absolutely make sure that she took her class down this way through the outdoors and head over to the gym. She had that, because that's how she rolls, that's how she teaches her class. And we have others that would say, well, no, the weather's not perfect today, I'm gonna this makes sense, and we'll go around this way. This isn't a whole lot different than how we access the back and control going out to the play yards during the day. There's ways to control it through building access controls. Doors are locked one way, and the teachers would have swipe cards, they could get them back in. So that's how we would monitor this. It's a great question, and it's front of mind in everything we do now.
I had to ask you.
Yeah, no, thank you for asking, because we do think about it constantly.
Thank you.
As a parent of a student who will be here the whole time that this is going on, it seems like this is a really interesting opportunity to learn about construction and all that kind of stuff. Have you guys put any thought into that being a little bit of the educational curriculum for the time period?
I'm looking at Tranya and Dr. Boylan now. We haven't had a chance to sit down. I've been thinking about it a lot. It's an opportunity that I wanted to engage more in when we did the high school project. COVID made that very difficult. We didn't get to have our engineers in with our STEM students as much as we should have. But I think we can change that in this. And so yeah, I think that's a no-brainer that we should do it. We haven't figured it out yet. We haven't even really had deep discussions about it yet.
Just as an engineer, anything you can do to get more kids into engineering would be fantastic. We can't find enough.
Did you just volunteer to come in and?
Well, I got a grandson that's a year and a half, so maybe.
All right, it's a deal. He does not look like a grandfather, am I right? No, thank you. I think we need to. It's a great opportunity. And that's a lot of the talk about Ithan and engaging in the environment and using it for learning, and how we do our themes here at Ithan could continue and should continue. And the STEM opportunities that come out of environmental science are right there. And and obviously construction, so I would love to see all that happen.
As much as it might be a learning opportunity, how are the current students going to be considered as well for construction as far as having a building being put up 30 feet outside their windows, still allowing spaces for recess for them to get outside when this building's going to be built on the current lines? And then also things like what has been learned from the current construction project at the high school regarding closing the campus to parents to pick up students after school, electricity randomly going out for extended periods of time, no air conditioning, lights, no smart boards, things like fire alarms going off all the time.
Great, all good questions. One thing that's better about this is it's not connected. So we're not physically connected to the old infrastructure, whereas we are at the high school. That's one way we'll do it. That's not to say that this will be easy. I mean, construction is never easy. We are talking now about, in our due diligence, how do we plan better? What are the lessons learned? How can we do this better? What can we write into the scope before we go out to bid the project? That, and in fact, I had a conversation with a retired facilities manager from another district who's built several buildings just today. And I asked him that same question, and he said what he would do in a situation like this, I had this up there, he said, I would, your regular construction fence, put it in the specs, you'll remember this, put it in the specs that it's gotta be taller and it's gotta have mesh. And let's put it in the specs that whether we do it as a district or it becomes the general contractor's responsibility, let's do an air quality company that comes in once a week and does a report, and we just have those reports so that we can monitor what the construction activity is like. So noise and sound, traffic, all of that stuff has to be thought about. We think we can build some of that in, and that's, I mentioned earlier that we'll soon be bringing on a construction management company. We'll bring them on sooner than we did in the high school project so that they can inform some of those things, and maybe we can get them into our bid specs. And then, I can't promise that it won't be without some paint, right? But those are great questions. And especially when you look at this, it's right up against the other building. 30 feet it's pretty close, but it's enough to do the work. It's enough of the distance. There's a lot of things we can put into place. I think just having separate construction entrances and a site so that you come in and if I'm working on a construction site, I drive in a certain way, I go through a certain gate, and I am back in the zone for construction. I'm not crossing back over. And then contractors are required to have clearances with us, the same clearances that our teachers have, that I have to have, our contractors are required to have too. So in that respect, we can also set timing, so we can talk to transportation, we can talk to Dr. Boylan and say, what are the time zones where we can't have any deliveries or we can't have any start of work. On the high school, most contractors are in at 5:30 or 6, so they're starting hours before the school day. And that's a good thing, except when they start a project that we didn't know about that knocked out the power and we had to deal with that. So those are real things. I don't think a lot of that will happen here simply because we're not connecting the buildings. That's a big win. Does that help? Yeah, thank you.
Somewhat
Mr. Moore.
relatedly, and I already know some of this story, but this proposal talked a lot about, A through E, assuming we're not relocating the kids so that they're not on an active construction site. Could you say more about what the process looked like for arriving at that recommendation, housing the kids elsewhere for their education over time while building right here where we're standing instead? And in addition to saying what the process was like at arriving at that recommendation, share if you can a little bit about what some of the biggest hinge points and factors were that led to that.
I'll jump in on that one. So we did investigate and look at the idea of trying to build right here where the current Ithan is. It would mean moving kids for 2 years. And so the question then became, where do we move kids? So we looked at the concept of, can we try to move them to Radnor and Wayne? And we'd have to use modular classrooms, but we're not allowed to do that at Radnor, so we'd be doing it at Wayne. We own some parks in the community. Could we create a makeshift school for 2 years and some parks? Mr. Pauling and I went to some of the corporate buildings in our area. thinking that, you know, a lot of people are working from home. Maybe there's a lot of empty corporate space in the community. Could we turn a corporate setting into a school into a school for 2 years? We had little images of Boss Baby, like going to these corporate parks with their briefcases every morning. And there was a cost involved in that. And our steering committee discussed that, and we talked with our parents. You know, your time in elementary school and in all school, it goes fast. And that 2 years where kids would be off somewhere else, and we don't know where, and the cost and the expense just became insurmountable for us administratively. It became too much of a challenge for us to figure out where we could do it, and especially looking at our whole property. You know, looking at our property and then seeing this design made us, as a steering committee, as an administrative team, more excited with the possibility of that, you know, this could work. You know, we have talked about, going back to your question, about maybe there will be times, you know, a lot of the building is, you know, going out in those fingers, but maybe there's times in the year with construction, we are doing something with those classrooms that are over here. I don't know. I mean, there's a lot of things we're gonna figure out as we move forward, but Mr. Moore, that's why we went with this option, because of the challenge of the 2 years. Where would those kids be for those 2 years?
On the schedule, you have the estimated completion for the 27-28 school year. And that, as I understand, would be the building of the new buildings. So the kids would then be in the new buildings for 27-28.
At some point, yes.
Which means you can't start demolition on this building and then doing the fields and doing the parking lot. So what is the estimated full completion date of when, if this ends up being the final, you know, the final layout? What's the timing of no more construction happening on my street?
So we're trying to be very careful with what the dates and where we send, where we place them. I think we're trying to have everything, I would say, between that academic year of 2027, 2028, and going into the summer of maybe 2028, everything done. If there's a chance we could be sooner, we would like to be sooner. We're trying to be, you know, manage expectations with it. Does that answer? So I think,
Yes,
you know.
yes. So you hit on one of the key challenges of the phasing of the project, right? So we not only need to have the building constructed, but at that next year, or at that, whatever that milestone is that we determine we're going to occupy the new building, we need to have access to it. So at least some portion of that site and that bus loop access needs to be available for circulation. Will the demolition of the balance of the building and the completion of the site work, will it likely continue after the building is occupied? Yes. How long and how deep, that's to be determined. But again, this is not an unusual project plan, I'll say. You know, our firm has been around for 60 years next year, and this is a very common solution. And yes, there's lots of concerns about the visibility and the safety, and how are contractors accessing the site? How is that demolition occurring? Where are materials being staged? When are deliveries being scheduled? And then, so how does this building operate in a way that's effective for education during a construction project? It's a challenge, but it's a challenge that we've met many, many times. And so, yeah, that complexity in partnership with the construction manager and with the district administration, we'll work through. And before anything starts happening, that will be presented and described in detail.
Summers become critical, you know, in those 2-year periods, and hitting the timelines to make sure we're using the best use of time over summer and breaks. Other questions? Just a little bit after 6, so we wanted to just be an hour. So the admin team will stick around if there's other individual questions. We did a sign-in sheet just so that, knowing that hopefully some neighbors, we were trying to really reach a lot of the, besides the whole Ithan community. I think a lot of the Ithan community, if your kids are in the school now, have been aware of what's going on, but we realized that the neighbors don't. what's going on. We've had one of your neighbors on our steering committee who's been a wonderful contributor to the steering committee and really helping us and pushing us to really think about this design and how to do it well. But we wanted to reach out to you as neighbors, and we want to continue to be good neighbors. You know, it's never great to hear there's a large construction project going on next to you. So please continue to reach out to us if there's questions or things, whether it's right now, whether it's through the process, whether as we move forward. Most of the community seems to have my cell phone number at this point in my career, but I'm going to be sure to give you all Bill Nolan's. We would rather know, you know, if there's things that are challenges and things that are happening.